Relates to addiction, here this evening. And I want to start with this story. There was a guy who was really preoccupied with himself, and he had quite a bit of resources. And one night he was driving home from work, and he was involved in a pretty serious accident. And the police came rolling up, and they found him on the side of the road, and he was walking back and forth and looking at his almost completely demolished car, and he was so distraught. He was saying, I can't believe it. My BMW, it's ruined, right? And he kept going on and on about his car and how tragic of a situation this was for him, right? And the police were having a difficult time, calming him down, and they were really trying to do so for good reason because, what he didn't realize is that in the accident, he had lost his right arm. And so he's there, bleeding. You're bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And they're like, sir, please calm down. Don't worry about your car. Don't you realize that you're missing an arm? Like, you're in shock. And he looked down at his arm that was missing. And he said, my Rolex. Okay. See, now I got you awake now. Right? Just had to make sure I softened you up a little bit here. We are looking at this topic of preoccupation with yourself. This is really what drives a lot of our problems as believers. We're going to take a look at this topic here tonight. First thing, we see in addiction settings and just even in life in general, sometimes you have friends or people that exhibit, characteristics, in line with some of these examples I'm going to give you here. You see, some people that take this self-centered life, and they exhibit it in the form of self-loathing, right? Like, I'm a terrible person. I'm horrible. I never do anything right. They do this as a way to sort of, manipulate, right? What are they really after? They're after attention, right? And so, even though they're feigning this humble sort of attitude about how lowly they are and how they don't deserve anything and they're this and they're that, right? It sometimes is nothing more than a manipulation, right? Because they have such a focus on themselves that they will continue to do this with everybody that they come in contact with. To the point, where people sort of get sick and tired of telling them look, it's like, when are you going to wake up? This is not a great strategy here, right? You're just forever, dwelling on yourself. And this is, one of the things that people suffer from, when they go through addiction and, they realize that they're trapped and they get in, pretty deep and it's hard for them to get out. And so, when they try over and over again and they fail over and over again, this is the inevitable result. I'm just a terrible person. I wish I was never even born. And you get this whole, situation, coming to the forefront. That's just, one example of a preoccupation with self. A second one would be the opposite of this, an exaltation, of self. Delusions of grandeur. Sort of like thinking of oneself, more highly than they ought to, with, constantly going to everyone and needing to be reaffirmed that everything that you're doing is great and wonderful and that, you're just a tremendous person and needing that constant, yes, that what you did is good. Yes, you did a great job. Yes, you're okay with it. It's also endlessly exhausting to deal with a person like that, right? Because they just suck all of the life out of you, the constant need for affirmation, the constant need to have the ego stroked, right? This is, again, another example of being preoccupied, with yourself. Another one, we could cite here, as well, would be self-pity. And I'm just a constant, so I call it the Eeyore syndrome, walking around like Eeyore, always me, everything bad always happens to me in life. And why can't anything ever go right? And look, everybody has their share of trials in life. I understand some people's trials are bigger than others. But, a strategy that we invent to bring attention to ourselves, to try to get others to recognize us, to affirm us, to, assess value, in us. And in that way, it sort of meets those core needs that are in each and every one of our hearts. These are all forms of an inordinate attention, to oneself. Now, again, what's the core problem here? The core problem is this is the sin nature in action. Right? This is the whole problem that we have as people, right? When Adam and Eve, existed in the garden, remember that they had a wonderful relationship with God and they were involved with Him. They paid an inordinate attention to Him, right? And they were able to worship Him. And the focus of their lives was on the Lord and their relationship with Him. But all of a sudden, when the devil shows up in the garden, it begins the temptation, process. And ultimately, Satan gets them fixed on themselves and, what they're going to gain from eating this fruit and what God may be hiding from them. And their focus becomes self. We can see that had deadly consequences. And the human race has been paying for that, ever since. That we're absorbed with our own needs. We're absorbed with our own wants. We're absorbed with our need for affirmation and love and constant encouragement and constant, bucking up and propping up. And those core problems are in our hearts because of our sin nature, which is constantly focused on what I want, what I need, what makes me happy, what satisfies my heart, what satisfies my soul. And so this is a problem of the sin nature. And it really drives addiction in a very great way. What is addiction after all? It's seeking pleasure, seeking joy, seeking a thrill, seeking a feeling in something other than the Lord. Now, you don't need to necessarily just be looking to alcohol or drugs or pornography or these ones that we talk about often in here. In this way. You got people who have issues with pride that do this, right? Constantly needing people to tell them how great they are, right? Constantly needing to reaffirm that. You got people that are struggling with, again, these other negative forms of this, where they're constantly needing someone to come alongside of them and encourage them. They're constantly overcome with sorrow, constantly overcome with anxiety, because they're so focused on themselves and their own needs and what they understand they want to be able to help them get through a day and what will give them some level of satisfaction. And so it all comes down to this focus on ourselves. Now, when we read in Luke chapter 4, one of the things that Jesus tells us is that we're to worship the Lord your God and serve Him only. Our hearts were made for a purpose, and they were made to worship. And that goes all the way back again to the first chapter in Genesis, right? We're made to worship something. Every single person is going to worship something. As Jesus says it this way, every single person is going to be a slave to something, right? You're either going to be a slave to the Lord, or you're going to be a slave to your own sin nature. That's the choice. It's A or B. We don't get a whole lot of options. The option is you're going to worship yourself, you're going to worship pleasure, you're going to worship, all the things that are surrounding your own needs, or you're going to worship something outside of yourself. You're going to worship the Lord. We're designed to worship something outside of ourselves. We're not designed to worship self. And the reason is because we're too small an object. Does that make sense? We're too broken an object. To worship yourself is not the highest good for man. It never is going to bring any kind of satisfaction. Yet we try it over and over and over again, and yet that's a well that we fall down into that we never crawl out of. It's never filled. You can pour praise and adoration and encouragement into a person who worships self, and no matter how much you dump into that, it will never fill up that cup, because we're not designed that way. If a person's worship is themselves in any of the forms in which it shows itself, there's inevitably going to be problems. There will not be a true joy that we should be experiencing in the Christian life, because we're too small an object to worship. The human soul needs an object big enough, great enough, awesome enough, majestic enough to occupy our full attention, to provide for us a lifelong pursuit, right? And that's exactly what the Lord gives us in Himself. He gives us an opportunity to worship him, the great God who stands outside of creation, who's outside of me, who's bigger than me. And I come to him and I worship him, and I find, in that journey to know the Lord and to be like him and to please him, I find that something that I can chew on. Something that is a worthy pursuit, something that I'll never quite, be able to master. In fact, probably not even get close, right? But it's in the everyday striving to long for the Lord, to love him, to serve him, to pursue him, to be like him. It's in that pursuit that we find the joy, we find the meaning, we find the purpose of our lives. We understand worship. Our attention is directed not at me, but at something outside myself. And that's where the true joy and the satisfaction comes. It's not in me and what I want in my circumstances. And the sooner as believers we figure that out, the more joy and happiness we'll receive. The more we remain focused on self, which is what the sin nature does to us. And all of the reasons that we build up as to why we have to take that drink or take that drug or look at that on a screen or turn to pride or turn to lying or turn to materialism or whatever the things are that enslave us, and there are many. There are many. The more I keep focusing on myself, those things they're just a poor substitute for worshiping the Lord. We're not designed for that. We're never going to be able to find satisfaction in those things. You see, self is not a glorious enough thing to captivate the soul. Self-preoccupation is disorienting. Now, why is it disorienting? It's disorienting because we look at ourselves, or when we're looking at ourselves, should I say when? My bad. When we look at ourselves, we're not looking at Jesus, right? So the more I'm focused on me, I'm missing what's really important. So that's what the sin nature is always trying to do. Yo, look here, man. You got needs. You need this. You want that. Look at that. You deserve this. Blah, blah, blah. That's what sin nature is always calling us to do. Look at yourself. Pay attention to yourself, your needs. How are you being mistreated? How is someone responding to you in the wrong way? How did someone slighted you? How are you not being respected? It's always pointing at you. But when we're not looking at Jesus, we're in trouble. Think about the writer of Hebrews. Looking onto Jesus, the pioneer of our salvation. The one who paved the way, the one who opened the doors of heaven to us. We're to focus on him. And when we're looking at him, we're not looking at ourselves. Because when we're looking at ourselves, we get a distorted picture of reality, right? We're not looking at things the way they really are. But when we look at the truth embodied in the person of Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, we see life clearly. We also see ourselves clearly. And we see that self-centeredness that tends to lurk in all of our hearts. And so we want to avoid this trap. We don't want to get into this in the first place. So not only is self-preoccupation disorienting, but it's also disappointing. Because once again, we never find what we're looking for. We're never satisfied. Nothing is ever enough. Every day, every word of praise, every attention seeking, every pleasure, no matter how much we pour into that black hole, it never fills it up. And so we end up disappointed and bitter and only trying to seek more. And self-preoccupation is discouraging because it leads us into an endless cycle of self-improvement, followed by failure, then new resolutions, followed by more failure, followed by more promises. And have you been there? Have you ever been there? That cycle of, okay, I'm going to do better. And then I start off and I'm doing a little better. And then I get my eyes back on myself again. And then I'm right back where I started from in step one. And I got to go through it again. And I'm in that endless cycle of up and down, up and down, up and down. It's the rat race. It's that washing machine that just chews you up and spits you out, right? If we can't get our minds off of ourselves, if we can't lift our vision to Jesus, if we can't, worship something outside of ourselves, we're going to be disoriented, we're going to be disappointed, and we're going to be discouraged. And that's how so many folks live their lives. So many Christians, especially those that are trapped in besetting sin. And so, if we want to avoid, all of that, again, we've got to set our hearts, set our minds, set our worship, on something outside of ourselves, and that's got to be the Lord. Now, I figured that I wanted to give you a little example of this. There are plenty of them from scriptures, and the one that I chose tonight is David. And I want to look at him as a case study because he was a really interesting guy, right? What does he start out as, David? He comes from humble beginnings, right? Okay, now we understand that he was a shepherd, right? That he was the youngest of his family. He was, quote unquote, the runt of the litter. Probably not a very tall person. He was certainly not, in the line of like, most powerful, powerful, rich, and famous in Israel. He certainly wasn't that, right? As the youngest person in the family, it was his responsibility to take care of the family's animals and probably some of the folks in the town. And when you think of shepherding, we have the wrong idea about it. We think that, when you were a shepherd, that you just, you took the sheep out, for a little walk like you do your dog, right? When the dog does his business and you bring him back home again and put him back in the house. That's not the way shepherding was done in the first century. Not at all. When you took the animals out to pasture, you were gone all summer long. You were gone till next winter. You went out in spring, came back the next season. And where did you go? You went in Israel, up into, the goal line. You went up into the wilderness. You went up into the heights. Up into the pasture lands, the high tablelands, that existed in Israel. And, are so famous also in Scotland. And when you would be out there, you were pretty much out there by yourself. And so David spent lots of time alone. And his only companion was the Lord. And one of the things that we know about David is that he was a musician, and so he spent lots of time, I'm sure, playing and singing songs to keep himself company at night around the fire, and sitting in the gate of the sheep pen, probably a rock enclosure. And so, there he would sing songs, and he would cultivate his relationship with God. He would take his focus off of himself and his own loneliness, and all of his needs, and I should be back, and I should be. Imagine how David could have done that, right? I should have been the firstborn. I got robbed. I got cheated. He could have been the person that fell to self-pity or any number of those traps, right? But he doesn't do that. Rather, he focuses on something outside of himself, his walk for God. We see that in the Psalms, one that he wrote early on in his life, I believe. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. Where can I go to meet with God? We see, his desire for the Lord and to put his focus on him, to put his worship, on the Lord himself. And over again, in many of the Psalms, we see this relationship that David has cultivated. We see this beautiful and wonderful connection he has, with the Lord. And as he grows in stature, he evidences the strength that the Lord gives to all those who walk closely with him and who worship him, who set the Lord as the king in their life, who aren't preoccupied, with their own self and with their own needs. And so, we see him as he grows into adulthood and as he's, conquering giants and defeating Israel's enemies. And, we see him still in this period of his life, writing, words like this in Psalm 27. One thing I have asked of the Lord that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to find him or inquire of him in his temple. And again, a guy, with a heart, that pursued God, that set God as the focus, someone outside of himself. And we see this in his writings. And then, David is able to cry out, even though when he's going through difficult times, right? When he's being pursued by Saul, and when Saul turns on him, even though he served Saul faithfully, we see him, crying out to the Lord with words like this: "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" Not that David never had any trials, right? He certainly did. Look at this. He felt like God had, sometimes it was not as near to him as he could be. And David would be in a position to be acutely familiar with that, right? Because he pursued God. He pursued intimacy with the Lord, right? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long must my enemies triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God, give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death, and my enemies will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praises, for he has been good to me. Wow. Here's a guy that was familiar with difficulties, familiar with trials, and yet he still refused to be self-absorbed. He still refused to have a pity party for himself. He still refused to see himself as life's punching bag. Yes, he cried out his feelings to God. Yes, he poured out his heart to God. But notice that he never lost sight, even in the difficult times when he's being hunted and pursued and his life is on the line. He never lost sight of who his God was. His eyes were on him. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in you, and I will sing your praises. Wow. Pretty amazing. But then, when David becomes king, when he reaches the pinnacle of life, so to speak, remember, he didn't seek out that position, did he? He was anointed by Samuel. He was God's choice. And he had plenty of opportunities to act against Saul and to take into his own hands his situation. He didn't do it. He waited for the Lord. But finally, he becomes king. And when he's king, he's under constant attack by Israel's ancient enemies living around. And he's constantly out, going to battle. And He's got all kinds of cases that he needs to decide, as the king, and people are coming to him and needing rulings for judgment and all kinds of busyness and all kinds of things that have to happen. And when he gets to the pinnacle of his life, he became so absorbed in all the things, that being, God's king required, that he sort of lost his focus. And very subtly, over time, his focus became self-centered. I just need rest. I just need comfort. Joab, you go out. You go out and fight this battle. I can't do another one. And that's when the fall happens, right? When he becomes self-focused rather than God-focused. But even in that, when confronted, look what he says here in this great Psalm 51. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Look at the words that he uses. Renew. See that? Renew a steadfast spirit within me. Don't cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. As happened with Saul, right? That was the anointing as king. Restore, look at that word. Restore unto me the joy of your salvation. Restore unto me. David realized he had lost something. When he got to the height of his life, to the height of his power, he lost his focus on the Lord. He lost worship. He lost the idea of being consumed with the Lord. And his eyes fell on himself and he became focused on his needs. All that he was doing. All the voices clattering for his attention. What was the most important thing a king in Israel could do? Cultivate the relationship with God. Happens to people in the church today. Get so busy, so involved in all the things that need to happen in day to day, week to week, month to month church life. And sometimes even as pastors, we forget why we're doing what we're doing. I'm so busy. Won't people just leave me alone? I need a break. I need this. I need. Oh, there goes the pity party, pastor. If you think it don't happen, you're wrong. But to keep it focused on the Lord. That's what David's doing here. He's praying for a return to that. And then, at the end of David's life, once he refocuses and turns his eyes away from himself and he finds, his focus back on the Lord, his joy and his praise returns. And I'm going to read this one for you. I don't have it on the screen, but it's Psalm 145. It's too long to put on there. So I just want to read this one for you. Psalm of David. This again is at the end of his life, most scholars believe. I will exalt you, my God, the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. Every day I will praise you. I will extol your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. One generation will commend your works to another. They will tell of your mighty acts. They will speak of the glorious splendor of your majesty, and I will meditate on your wonderful works. They will tell of the power of your awesome works, and I will proclaim your great deeds. They will celebrate your abundant goodness and joyfully sing of your righteousness. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. All you have made will praise you, O Lord. Your saints will extol you. They will tell of the glory of your kingdom and speak of your might, so that all men may know of your mighty acts and the glorious splendor of your kingdom. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures throughout all generations. The Lord is faithful to all his promises and loving toward all he has made. The Lord upholds all those who fall and lifts up all who are bowed down. You hear that one? The Lord lifts up all those who fall and who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food at the proper time. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. You see that? You open your hand. Where are our desires satisfied? From God's open hand, not from our own focus on our own needs, not trying to provide for ourselves satisfaction and happiness. Your open hand will satisfy the desires of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways and loving toward all he has made. The Lord is near to all who call on him, and to all who call on him in truth. He fulfills the desires of those who fear him, and he hears their cry and saves them. The Lord watches over all who love him, but the wicked he will destroy. My mouth will speak in praise of the Lord. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. That's toward the end of his life. As he comes back to the Lord and recognizes that it's in him that he was going to find his joy. Quickly here, moving to the end, couple steps here to help you take some practical action in this. Number one, if you're going to remove self-centeredness from your life, take the advice here of Jesus in Matthew chapter 16. Deny yourself. We've talked about this verse a lot. Numerous speakers up here have talked about this verse. Deny yourself. Understand your life is not about you. That's a hard truth to learn, isn't it? We need to be retaught it every single solitary day. Because every day I get up, I go back to thinking my day is about me. No, it isn't. It's about the Lord. Deny yourself each day. Pray that. Ask the Lord to help you. Every day you get up, say, Lord, what's this day going to be about? Is it going to be about you? It's going to be about me. Lord, help me to be about you today. Number two, set your minds on things above. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 2, not on things that are on earth. Because what I think about shows where my focus is. Right? If I'm thinking about things that are down here, my own needs, my own self, my own wants, my own happiness, what I deserve, what I should be receiving, how poorly I'm being treated, woe is me, whatever, add it all up. That's not being focused on what's above. That's being focused on what's down here. There are higher and better things, and truer things, and weightier things, and things with more glory that reside above. I need to lift my thoughts to those. Set your thoughts on things above tomorrow. And three, serve others. Nothing takes your focus off of you like when you're doing something for somebody else. And yes, when you do stuff for other people, there are going to be ungrateful louts. Just so you know. Does that come as a surprise to anybody? No. Who do you really do it for, though? Do it for the Lord, because he loves them. And I can bless them. And it doesn't matter what they say, whether they're grateful or not, because I know my God is the one I'm looking to. I ain't looking to you. I'm looking to him. See? What are you focusing on? Serve others. My last piece of advice to you, I saw this quote. Don't know who said it, but it's pretty cool. Cease to be the subject of your attention. You like that? Write that one down. Write that one down, folks. Cease to be the subject of your attention. And what will you find? You'll find that you'll be happier and will have more joy and more satisfaction and purpose in life than you can possibly imagine.